Hey everyone, welcome back to another great episode of Breaking Barriers Now. Today, my guest is Jim Hendrix. And if you're anything like me, when you first hear his name, you're going to be like, wait, what? And he and I talked about that when we first met. But he is definitely not the guitar player, but he is someone you need to know. And as we've come to know one another, I definitely encourage all parents out there to make sure you tune in and get connected with him. He'll give you all that information before we part ways today, and I'll make sure I have all that information out for everybody. But first off, I just want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for being willing to be transparent and open and share your story. I appreciate it.
Thank you for the platform. I really appreciate it.
No problem. No problem. All right, Jim. Well, let's just go ahead and dive in. I'd love for you to just kind of open it up and share a little bit about your backstory and,
Okay.
anything that you would want to share to help people, with whatever they're going through in life.
Okay. You said I could start at the beginning, so I there's a few things at the beginning that I think are kind of important. My mom and dad got pregnant. My mom told my dad in a phone booth, and he told her that she would be a great mom, but he would be a horrible dad. And he kind of lived up to that.
Mm.
Their marriage lasted 2 years, but by the time I was 6 months old, they were separated. I was handed over the fence to the neighbors, and I was pretty much raised by them because my mom was always working. She had an active social life. My mom is deceased now, so I can say those things. I never knew exactly what I could believe, what she said. So some of the things that she told me about my dad that I didn't know until I was well into my 30s were that she was abused by him. He was a womanizer. He couldn't stand a baby crying, so he would grab me by an arm or a leg and throw me into the crib and then leave. I have one shoulder that had to be reconstructed after it actually went out in college when I heard gunfire. I went to USC and Southern California, not South Carolina.
Yes.
And,
Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, it is in Watts, so that does happen often. But I army crawled towards more walls between me and the sound and tore my shoulder out of the socket. Seemed odd, but that happened. And I was in my 30s, actually after my first divorce, when I went and had it fixed, and the doctors had two orthopedic surgeons messing with my shoulders, saying, "Are you sure it's the left one? Because the other one is kind of loose too, and I have a loose hip that gives me some problems occasionally." So can't always believe what my mom said, but maybe. And I had my grandparents were in my life, and that was really cool. My grandfather on my mom's side died early. My uncle is my favorite person in the whole world, except for my wife. My wife now.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, and he was the dad that I really need. And he's just awesome in every way. And everybody needs somebody in their life like that.
Definitely.
So I went off to school and basically was a wonderkind. I could do no wrong. I got great grades all the way through school, pretty much until I got to college. And I went to college a year early. And I went from a high school with 200 students to University of Southern California that had 25,000. And I never liked to do things easy, so I picked physics as a major. And because the cost to go for 12 units or 18 units was the same, I started with 18 units. I finished 9. Then I was behind, so I did it again. It took me twice before I learned that lesson. I finished 12 units the second
Yeah.
time.
Well, hey, that's
Yeah,
progress.
yeah, yeah.
That's progress. I tell
I
people it's not about perfection, it's progression.
Yeah. And my grades in physics were mediocre, but um, in my second semester of physics, I had to go to my professor's office for some reason or other, and he said, he asked me if I had work study. I said yes. He said, "Well, would you like to come work for me?" Uh, it was a sounding rocket lab, so basically a rocket that gets sent up into the upper atmosphere, and then they let it crash land into the sand in White Sands, New Mexico.
Mm.
Well, except for the one that they'd launched previously, which landed in the rocks. And I spent a lot of that time prying aluminum off of the instrument package. And
Interesting.
yeah, so I learned a lot. And then in the summer, they had another launch, but I wasn't invited. And so I was kind of upset. And my third semester physics professor, I approached him and I said, "Hey, I have work study, and you can get me for $1 an hour, basically." And so I got to work for him. He was an Einstein genius. He did his PhD in general relativity. He was a concert violinist. And I spent time doing research with him, first on 11th century music, looking for patterns to help to understand the oral tradition and how patterns fit into that kind of a process. And then on something called optical bistability, which is complicated and I won't talk about it. But needless to say, over the next really 3 years, I was treated like a grad student because they didn't know how else to treat me. They sent me to seminars for grad students and told me, "Don't worry if you don't understand, you'll understand later." And that was true. And then when I finished, I had actually electricity and magnetism was my curse. I had a professor who was a very famous man. He had discovered the ratio of the mass to the voltage to the charge of an electron. He was a big name scientist, and he was not a great teacher. And so I
met a lot of those.
I was convinced I wasn't going to graduate. I was just going to be
wow.
done. And my professor, my third semester physics professor, who I had worked for, said, "Tell you what, let's do work study. You'll do that class. Or I mean, not work study, but individual study. We'll do that class." We did it in a semester. He covered up all of my weaknesses from before in a semester's worth of time, meeting with him, I don't know, 6 to 8 times. He really was amazing. And then I went off and tried to get a job. It was 1980, 1982, 83, recession, or it was really hard to find a job. The Navy was my first suitor. They wanted me to be on a nuclear submarine. And all went well until I did the physical. And they asked the question, "Have you ever smoked marijuana?" And well, right before the end of my time in college, I had done it once. So I said 1 month. Well, the doctor added a 1 to be 11 months. Because it had to be 12 months before they would take you.
Oh no.
So then I was put in this ethical dilemma when they asked me, "Okay, so is it 1 month or 11? Do I get the doctor in trouble?" And so that kept me out of the Navy, probably a good thing.
Yeah.
and shortly after that, I went to work for a small laser company. And I had been working at the Center for Laser Studies at USC during my undergrad time. So I met people who basically helped mentor me, and in college, doing the work, I realized I could do it even though my grades didn't show it. And I think I got lucky a lot, and had fought that imposter syndrome a lot, thinking people were going to find out.
Yep.
I went from a company called Apollo Lasers. They were bought out by Allied Corporation right about the time I joined. And then I went to Hughes following my mentor from Apollo. And he was great. He helped me all the way through. They gave me the office and phone. No, they gave me the phone number of a senior scientist who retired. And so I got this phone call from another Hughes organization, and they wanted me to go and help them with a laser project on a rocket system. It was Hughes Missile Systems at the time. And so I went to basically my boss's boss and said, what do I do now? And,
wow.
And he said, oh, go see what they're doing, come back, tell us, and we'll sign somebody to take care of it. Well, 2 years later, I was managing the project and the lead engineer. And they never did give it to anybody else. And they
It must mean you were good at it.
Then they gave me another project to go on with it.
Oh,
so
wow.
I was doing well.
Yeah.
Then I decided I was going to go work for the CIA. And
Okay.
my friend and I applied sort of at the same time. And he ultimately went. And along the way, the Department of Energy was looking to add optics to nuclear weapon systems to help improve their safety and security. And I had been doing optical firing systems at Hughes. So my friends were being interviewed, and they kept saying, well, you need to see this Jim Hendrix, talk to him. And so short story, they hired me. I was able to hire my own staff, and I brought a lot of people from Hughes, build an organization and capability, and all was well, except that I was gone a lot, and my job took way too much priority. I had a son, and my first wife decided that she liked someone at Aikido better than me. And that was kind of awkward since we all knew each other. Unfortunately, he just passed, which was very sad, because he was really a good guy. Yeah. And he was a good stepdad for my son. But that, she left my son with me. And so I traveled a lot, so I took him with me. So he got to go to Washington, D.C. several times, and he got to go to the Meat Animal Research Center in Hastings, Nebraska. Anyway, basically what I'm trying to lay is that I was really successful. I was really successful, and I went to work. They asked me to go to Lawrence Livermore National Labs and work on. Well, they didn't know what they wanted me to work on, but Lawrence Livermore National Labs knew what
Just
they
go
wanted.
here.
Yeah, they wanted me to. Well, they wanted me to go and generate new business because nuclear weapons were out of vogue at the time. Reagan had said, we're not going to do those things anymore.
Right.
And so Lawrence Livermore, of course, wanted me to do lasers because that had been my background.
Mhm.
And so I worked on the National Mission Facility, which just recently announced that it had gotten more energy out than they put in. More light energy out, or more energy out than light energy that they put in. You go to
Okay.
wall, plug it through. So that was, it's a big deal. It's
Right.
like inventing the light bulb,
Yeah.
and I was big part of that team in the development part. So I had gone through another marriage in that process, and in California, I met a woman who had 4 children from 4 different dads,
Mm.
and I wanted to rescue them. That's kind of my personality. And we got married. She had just finished a bachelor's degree in human development and discovered that the only job she was going to get was working for a methadone clinic, seeing 40 heroin addicts a week.
Oh my gosh.
And so that's like, no, that's not what I want. That's not
Yeah,
what she wanted to do.
especially if you have kids, like you're bringing home a lot.
Yeah.
A lot. Yeah.
So she found a place that she wanted to go to get her master's degree in marriage and family therapy.
Okay.
And it was a Christian-based organization,
Mhm.
and they had a deal where the spouse could go for half the price. Being one who had already gotten a master's degree and liking learning. Actually, I call myself obsessive. I have obsessive learning disorder.
I think that's probably why you and I align. Because I think we both kind of have that. I'm always trying to learn new things. Yeah.
So I went, and
Awesome.
I loved it. And I practiced as a marriage family therapist for about 11 years in parallel with my engineering career for most of that time.
Interesting. How did those things kind of align? Like, because I'm sitting here thinking like an engineering career, and then you go into marriage and family therapy. So how did that work?
It actually probably was more valuable to my engineering career than most people could imagine, because it helped me to deal with people even more so than I learned in my engineering management master's degree. And they had really put an emphasis on people skills there too.
That's good.
And in marrying, wanting to save 4 kids, that was really another reason why I wanted to do that degree and did that work. I got introduced to the work of Dr. Daniel Amen during that period of time. And he states that psychiatrists are the only profession, only medical professionals who don't look at what they treat. And so it's kind of like they're throwing darts, medication tipped darts at a dartboard, hoping that it will work. And what the Amen Clinics does is they do what's called SPECT imaging. And what it looks at is blood flow and brain activity. And they can do a test. The normal test they do 2 of. One is at rest and the other one is in concentration. And so you can see things like ADD and different types of ADD. Kind of depends on what parts of the brain play together with your frontal lobes dropping out when you try to concentrate. And so that is really where I got started doing brain health kinds of things. And I used with my clients, I worked mostly with individuals and children instead of with married couples. And I would just use the images with, for example, addicts, and show them what different substances do to your brain. It's a whole lot better than Nancy Reagan's "This is your brain on drugs with a egg in a frying pan."
Right. I remember
Uh,
that.
yeah, yeah. Some of the people won't know that, but
I know. Anybody in this generation won't know, but we remember that. I remember watching that in school, like, what? And I
um,
lived with a drug addict, so that was really interesting too.
yeah. So about the time, actually, the time when I took the exam to be licensed as a marriage and family therapist in California, um, my youngest daughter, stepdaughter,
Mhm.
was showing all the signs of being borderline. And I was very concerned. And I spent most of while my wife at the time spent most of her time studying. We went away for a week, and her oldest sister stayed with her.
Mhm.
And I spent most of my extra time trying to figure out, okay, what do we do?
Yeah.
Um,
When you say borderline, just for anybody out there that's not really up to, the lingo or whatever, you're talking about borderline personality, correct?
Borderline personality disorder, yeah, um, it's borderline psychotic.
Mhm.
And so when I got home, she got in a fight with her oldest sister and her mom, and I was extremely concerned for her safety.
Mhm.
She was running out, and I chased her, caught her at the door. We crashed into the door because we were moving fast, broke her cheekbone, and I was charged with misdemeanor assault,
Mhm.
taken to jail. It was horrible, and
Wow.
the charges were dropped.
Okay.
A year later, I found out that there was a warrant for my arrest for felony assault.
Oh, wow.
Um, and I, not knowing what I was really doing, pled no contest in the end. And
Mm.
so, after having top secret clearances and all of that went away.
Right.
And but I didn't lose a client. I was honest with every client. Didn't lose a single. Working
Oh,
with their
that's good.
kids, because they knew me.
Right.
Um, and I spent 2 months in jail the first
Mm.
time, pretty much in solitary because I have obstructive yeah, what's it called? I use it sleep apnea. That's it. And so, fortunately, they moved me to medical instead of being in with the violent offenders,
Right.
which was interesting. I was there for a few hours and had a God moment with my cellmate, and then spent the rest of 2 months by myself, seeing only the guard to bring me my food.
Wow. So you went from a thriving career, you top secret clearances, and I want to acknowledge you because that story, to share something like that, is not very easy, right? But I want to kind of just acknowledge this because this is what a lot of people deal with, right? This is the part of life. This is life. This is the one instance you don't plan for, and you
Right,
make one wrong move, and it literally can shift the entire place that you thought you were going, right?
right. I
So
bet it took less than 5 seconds. There were
yeah,
5 seconds in my life that changed the trajectory. Um,
yeah. So what did you do after that? Because a lot of
well,
people give up at that point. So what did you do? Because obviously you didn't
I
give up.
I didn't. I continued doing marriage and family therapy. Actually, I right before that I had left engineering and wanted to focus on doing marriage and family therapy or psychotherapy because I didn't do a lot of marriages.
Hmm.
And then when I was in jail, my wife, um, let's just say she was very promiscuous while I was out or
Hmm.
in, and that and she continued when I got out.
Okay.
So that didn't last very long. I decided that I needed to go back to engineering because I wasn't really a good businessman. I would take whoever needed help, whether they could pay or not, and went through my savings. There was a company in San Diego that didn't seem to care that I had a felony. And so I went there. Everything was great. And I went through a divorce, my third divorce. Everything was fine for a year, a little more. Met another woman, and this one was toxic. Everything was great until it wasn't.
Right.
And then it was like, I don't know, nitroglycerin and a hammer. And I went from being the sweet, kind person that I had always been to being a classic batterer. I didn't hit her, but she brought out things in me that I had no idea what needed. I, after 4 months, tried to kill myself. I cut my throat. Did a really good job.
Oh my God.
The psychiatrist on call still refers to me as the surgeon. And that started a series of 10 hospitalizations over the next year.
Jesus.
And I had also lost my job. That really didn't have anything to do with it. They didn't get a contract that they were expecting, and so they had a big cutback.
Do you think those things were, well, I have a couple questions here.
Yeah.
The first one, because I, with what I do with a lot of coaching and stuff like that, like I hear this a lot. And I have a heart of gold too. And so it's like the rescue part, right? Do you think that there was a pattern for your relationships because you thought you could rescue these women?
Yeah, I do. And the last one, I didn't think that was the case. She was successful in her own right, and but she was, and it was, everything was wonderful up until it wasn't, and then she was, whatever it was that caused me to just lose my composure and yell and scream. I don't do that.
You know what's interesting though, and you have a mental health license background, right?
Yep.
But I think when we go through things, like I'm not licensed as a mental health therapist, but I can relate to people in different ways because of what I've been through, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sitting here listening to you, and I think about my own kind of journey and things that came out later on in life, right? And you told us a little bit about your backstory and how you grew up, and I'm wondering, it makes me kind of wonder, like, those things, only because I know myself, and this was my case.
Yep.
So I'm not sure if it's the same, but that's what I'm going to ask you. But the upbringing you had, do you think that it was because you hadn't really healed through that journey that
I
those
think so.
things were coming out?
I think so. I didn't even know about those things.
Right.
Because
I
was so young
today. Yeah.
Yeah, I was so young. And I tried to kill myself. I was not trying to kill me. I was trying to kill that person that I couldn't stand.
Right. Wow.
And she and I had an altercation, ultimately, that led to another misdemeanor charge that violated my probation. And they gave me a concurrent sentence that ended up with me having a total time in jail, including the first 2 months that I mentioned before of a year.
Mm.
And after that, after I got out, I was homeless. Thanks to Catholic Charities, I had a place to sleep indoors for about 4 months. And then Social Security magically came through, disability. Like that doesn't happen for anybody.
Right.
But I guess
Well,
with
that
10
should tell you something, right? You're
yeah,
meant to
with
be here.
yeah, with 10
You're meant to keep
hospitalizations,
going.
with 10 hospitalizations. Oh, and that's another part of this is I was told I was a schizophrenic, I was bipolar. And when so I got through for 3 years I was on disability.
Mhm.
And I finally, a friend of mine who had been a longtime friend, got me a job with a camera company that's in Boston, or in the Massachusetts area. They're at least they're America's sales office,
Mhm.
as basically the technical person for the Americas.
Okay.
And so the company itself is in the Netherlands. They sent me there for 4 months, for 3 months to start with. I lived there for 3 months and learned things and helped them. And I spent, I think, about 3 years with that.
Wow.
And then went through, something happened that I just still don't understand. And they thought I was the greatest thing, and then they didn't. And
Mm.
I still don't know what happened, but I went through unemployment for quite some time. And then I got a job sort of just as unemployment was running out. It was a good job.
Mhm.
And then the company got in trouble and they laid off me and a bunch of senior people.
My
Um,
goodness.
and that was March of 2020.
Okay. Around
So
so like, because how old were you during this time? Like all
uh,
these things were going on.
well, let's see. So when I was in jail, I was about 50, I
Okay.
guess. I'm 61 now, almost 62.
I didn't know that.
So yeah. Um, and so I'm older. It's harder to get a job the older you are. Um, and during the pandemic, it was really hard.
Mhm.
Fortunately, they kept extending unemployment.
Yeah.
Um, I interviewed a lot, but it wasn't until I found my job here in Colorado, where now I'm the program manager for an optics company that makes things for semiconductor capital equipment and military and medical and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And things are great. I was afraid of the woman who I was married to. We were together, I would say 9 months, but that's not even really true because I was in the hospital or in jail a lot of that time.
Right.
And I paid her half of everything I made
Mm.
for 9 years before I got the courage up to divorce her.
Mm. Wow.
And I still have to pay another 2 years. So that sucks.
But
But
this is why I do this though. Like when I met you, I would have never known this stuff, right?
mhm,
And that's what I tell people. I'm like, we meet people all the time, but
yeah,
we never know the true backstory.
yeah,
So I definitely commend you for just being willing to open up and share this, because I think that, we're going to go into, in a couple minutes, we're going to go into like what you do now, because, and anybody that sees the video, they can see it on your backdrop. But, there's this journey that has to occur where we
yeah,
find our passion from what we've been through, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
so I just want to commend you for not giving up, definitely.
Well, I
And
want to
I'm
share.
grateful I get to meet you, and I'm grateful for everybody that gets to meet you now.
I want to share one more little piece,
Yeah, go for it.
and that is after I decided that I was going to divorce my now ex-wife. I threw up a prayer to God saying, please send me someone who will not be drama, will not be, will be perfect for me.
Mm-hmm.
The next day, I got a Facebook message from my high school sweetheart.
Okay.
And
I wish all prayers got answered that fast.
yeah, it's the miracle of all miracles as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
We reconnected. We are now married.
Nice.
We are perfect for each other. Her brother and I were friends and kung fu partners in high school.
Okay.
And that's how I met her.
Nice.
So, and yeah,
Isn't that interesting how you kind of ended up, and I've done this in my life too, like career wise, it's like you just completely went full circle in your relationships and endured. But I wonder, this is something that I think about a lot, and I'm listening to you, and I wonder if you would have appreciated her as much as you do now had you not gone through all those other things.
I so wish I could go back in time and make a different decision. I know it wouldn't have been easy.
Right.
We were too young, but there was so much pain and heartache on both sides.
Right.
That didn't have to happen.
Yeah.
There would have been more. There would have been other things, but yeah. So,
but at the same time, and because I do that a lot too, where I'm like, golly, if I could have just done this then, and and so now I always tell people, like, don't even think like that. Just pay it forward, right? But I think about, like, you guys coming together now, though, you both had a journey, right? Because you kind of just a little bit harped on a little bit, she was going through some stuff, you were going through some stuff. So I wonder if, because I think that everything's like God's timing is always perfect, right?
Yeah.
So I think that it was probably best for both of you to get back together now.
Yeah, we're both pretty much convinced that it was our journey that made us perfect for each other.
Yeah.
Now, so
yeah, and your journey made you who you are now.
Yeah.
So
it did.
Yeah. So don't ever regret that. I think that everything truly does. Now in my life, I know that everything does happen for a reason, and things happen when they're supposed to happen, right?
Yeah.
Well, let's get a little bit. I appreciate you sharing all that. I really do, because there's somebody out there that needs to hear what you were talking about, all of it. And I wish that we could go on for a couple hours, because I feel like there's a whole lot more to that story. But I'll definitely make sure everybody knows how to connect with you so they can, get more of that story later on if they want to. But let's talk a little bit about what you're doing now, because I know when I met you, we talked a little bit. My daughter got diagnosed with ADHD and things like that, and now you're really passionate about helping parents with their kids, when it comes to brain health and things like that. So let's talk a little bit about that journey and what got you, kind of more motivated to do that.
It was really during the pandemic. I had a lot of time to think because I was unemployed, and
of course,
it's like, what do I really want to do? And what I'm really passionate about is helping people. It doesn't really matter their age. I target parents and their children because I think it will help the most in the long run. The stuff that I have, the material I have on convene under Loving Your Child's Brain in the Uniquely Yours community it works for anybody of any age, whether you're 2 or 200.
Yeah.
Okay, there's nobody 200 yet, but it's coming.
Yes.
Parents are the ones who see their kids. I would say for teachers too, because they see their kids probably more than the parents do most of the time.
Sometimes, yeah.
But understanding that behavior problems really aren't behavior problems most of the time. They're brain issues. And if you understand that and you can treat it that way, your whole paradigm shifts. It's everybody get on board now. There's a medical issue.
Yes.
Not a behavior issue. It's not volitional. Your child is not defiant because they're just evil or whatever the word you
Right.
want to use. They are defiant because there's a thing that runs up the center of their brain called anterior cingulate gyrus, which don't worry about the words, ECG, is on fire. It is over functioning, and it makes them say no when you ask them if they want ice cream. And that is tamed by a large amount of serotonin, whether it's through medication or through food and supplements, doesn't matter.
Right.
I give people the option for both. I tell them what's available in both categories and how to help. In them, I have a bunch of free material that basically talks about what each part of the brain does, what it does when it's working well, and what it does when it's not working, and allows people then to be able to choose what of my other material that is paid that they might want to choose, that might be useful for them. And if they can't figure it out themselves, I have an assessment that basically goes through in excruciating detail and helps me to tailor what they should do next. And it, I've tried to make it really inexpensive. I don't want to make a lot of money off of one person, one family. I want to help a lot of families.
Yeah.
And that's my goal. I want to help 1 million families in 10 years. I want to do 1,000 this year.
Yeah.
So far, not so good yet.
Get there.
but
we'll get there.
but I'm working on it.
Yeah.
The assessment is very detailed and there's a lot of questions. And you can download it for free. You can answer the questions. You can have mom, dad, grandparents, teachers. I don't care how many people you do. The price is the same for me to evaluate it, combine all the data, and sit down with the person or with the family and go through it and give them recommendations. So it takes a fair amount of time, but I'm willing to do that because I want to help.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm a rescuer. Don't tell me.
It's a gift and a curse, right? It's okay. Here's what I've learned. It's okay because I still love to help people, and I could definitely resonate with what you were saying because I was giving stuff away for free and wondering why I was going into debt, why everybody else was buying houses, right? Like it was like, wait, something's off. And it really wasn't until I got around people who were like, Jody, something is not right here. You got to take care of you too. So yeah, that's just something that we go through. But I'm just kind of curious, like, I don't think it's a bad thing to be a rescuer, obviously, because I think having a good heart is what allows us to do what we do, right? Like we're able to help more people on a massive level because we have that heart, because we've been through hard things in our lives, right? But so if I have a parent who comes up to me and they're like telling me about their kid or anything like that, and I say, you know what, I got this great guy that I know, his name is Jim Hendrix, and this is what he specializes in. Like what's the best process to send that parent to you?
The best way I think is through the Convene link. They sign up for a free Convene membership. That's what we call it, and then they'll be directed to my material. And I recommend that people look at the first stuff that comes up. There's a little video that comes up. And then the first module is called something or other introduction. And in that, there are 9, we call them experiences, but they're sub-modules, if you will. And the first 4 are really important because they help people understand what they need to look for, what the brain, different parts of the brain do, and a couple of other things that kind of prepare you for the material. And it gets repeated when you dig into a part like, say, ADHD, which is not one thing, but 7. And if you treat the wrong type with the typical medication, you're going to get a psychotic child.
Right.
And we don't want that.
Right.
That's really important. I mean, Ritalin or Adderall, great medications for typical ADD. They work instantly.
Mhm.
But on the wrong kid, the wrong brain type, they cause them to be psychotic.
Yeah.
And there's also, when I talked to Kate in another interview, who's the head of Uniquely Yours, even on medication for the right type, the child will start to be kind of, they'll lose their personality.
That's what I saw. That's what I
Yeah.
saw.
And there's ways
it
around
definitely
that.
happens. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what really, and for most people know what I do, but one of the things that I do is nutrition, right? So I actually learned nutrition for brain health because my mom had multiple sclerosis and I had to learn how to get her off of some of her antidepressants and things that were actually causing her to be more suicidal than less suicidal.
Yeah.
But later on, fast forward, way down the line, when my daughter was, I think she was 7, and that's when she officially got diagnosed. And she was given, we tried like 3 different medications that the pediatrician was giving her, very low dosage, but they were having a very negative effect on her. So she would be great during the day at school. So her teacher was like, yeah, she's great. Keep her on the medication. And I'm seeing her come home, Mom, my stomach's hurting. She was playing sports. She couldn't even go to her practices. It was just really, as a parent, I was like, I can't, this is not okay. And so I just took a deep dive and started learning more about, I'm like, okay, well, if I learn nutrition for brain health, this is the same thing that's brain health. And so I just kind of took a deep dive and did that. And when I sent the research to her pediatrician of what I had found, because of course I wanted, I want the doctor to sign off on it, right? Like I know my lane. And so I'm like, okay, let me see. And I sent it to her, and she reached back out and she said, well, Jody, you would know more about that stuff than I would. You can, if that's what you want to try it. And I was like, okay, well, I appreciate your honesty. And yeah, so literally that was the last time my daughter ever took medication. That was it. And while I will say we still kept her on the 504 plan, which is what the school, what's provided, and can I keep them? And honestly, I think all kids need that. Because even as an adult, I don't like to sit still for hours and hours on end, right? So I think that was a good thing to stay put. But yeah, I mean, there's just, I love what you said about that, because parents need to hear that, because yeah, the doctors prescribe medication, which is what doctors are taught to do. Right. But unless you have somebody that has like, a holistic, any kind of other background, like a nutrition background or any kind of other way of managing something like that, you could end up messing your child up even more. And I've heard some stories from kids that were on medications most of their life and what it did to them. Yep. And I'm like, yeah, that's not okay. We have to pay more attention, So I commend you for what you do, because I think that, as that parent who needed someone like you, and I'm just grateful that I did look for alternative methods. But as that parent, I talk to parents all the time that are dealing with this stuff. But I do like that you also help the parent, because I also realized that I had some tendencies that I had to deal with, right? So I think it's very important, and teachers too, right? I talk to teachers sometimes, and sometimes I think as adults, we just get so used to just being like, whatever, and we don't think about some of the things that we are dealing with and how we're projecting that onto our children or on the children we're around. And so I think if anything, I really hope and pray that this reaches a ton of people to where they might think differently and just understand that, hey, there's reasons behind this stuff. And we really need to understand what those reasons are, instead of just completely thinking it's one thing or the other. Right.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I love that you're doing what you're doing. And you guys, he's talking about the Convene Communities platform, which is where my community is as well. And it's where this podcast is. And, it's just great to have other good people coming together And, you have your group inside of the Uniquely Yours community, which I will be posting that. And that's a community for children and parents, right? So you have Uniquely You, which is for children, and then you have Uniquely Yours, which is for parents, and where we can support, encourage, and empower each other, right? So that's awesome. So what would you say to that parent out there that might be struggling with their own stuff, but is also struggling with their kid? Like maybe their kid's getting in trouble a lot at school, and this is a working parent, they might not have as much time. What would you say to that parent?
I would say the best investment you can possibly make in your child's future is to understand their brain and help them. And you'll find that it's going to help you too, because a lot of things are hereditary. A lot of parents find that, oh my gosh, I have that too, when they start going.
Yep, that was me. That was me, like turning the mirror around. Ooh, ouch.
Yeah, and I tell people, life does not have to be so hard.
Yeah.
There are ways to be able to make things easier that are not, they take work, but they're not hard.
Right. That's awesome. Well, Jim, I appreciate you for coming on here. Do you have any other final words of encouragement or anything that you want to share before we part ways today?
I guess just this, that a child born today is expected to have a life expectancy of 130 years. We still don't know. We still don't know how to cure those things like dementia and Alzheimer's.
Right.
And so, and those things start like 30 years before the person is symptomatic. Do you really want your kid to be warehoused for half of their life because you didn't know enough to help them in the beginning? And that's what I try to impart on parents.
Wow.
Whether you pay me a nickel or not, I don't care. You'll learn a lot just from the future.
Wow. Mic drop on that one. No. That's awesome. Well, Jim, thank you again for being here. Thank you for sharing your story. Definitely. You guys, this has been another amazing episode of Breaking Barriers Now. I'm your host, Jody Watkins. Today, I had my guest, Jim Hendrix. He is inside the Convene Communities platform where I dwell as well. There's a ton of us doing some great things. So I really hope that you will come and join us and see what everybody's doing inside of the platform. Jim, thanks again for your time today. And
Thank you,
I
Jody.
can't wait to be around you more in the future.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Have a great day, and make sure you share this show. Make sure you share it to everyone, every parent, every child, everybody that you think could benefit from this, which probably is everybody in the world. So keep sharing, keep subscribing, keep following, and we'll keep going. All right. Thank you again, and God bless.